What's going on, guys? The Comics Kid 2099 here to talk to you about a book that I do not have in my hands because it was an ebook when I read it, and that is The Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes, written by Suzanne Collins. This is the prequel to the Hunger Games books that came out several years ago, and my sister is a bigger fan of that franchise than I am. She's read all the books, I think she's seen all the movies, and she read this prequel to the series, and she told me, spoilers, this book features the character, I don't know how to say his name, so here it is on the screen, but they call him Koryo. That's a nickname, so I'm going to call him Koryo Snow. This guy, he's like 17 here. This is, I think, about 60 years before the first Hunger Games book, and this character, spoilers again, eventually becomes the president of Pan Am, which is the dystopic United States of America very far in the future after, I think, a nuclear war, and then after a civil war much later. And so this is before he becomes the president of Pan Am, and he is just a teenager. His family used to be incredibly wealthy, and then they lost a lot of their money over the years, and so he is going to be a mentor to one of the contestants in the 10th Hunger Games. Sometime when Koryo was a little kid, there was a civil war where the districts, there are 12 or 13 districts, they rose up in rebellion against the capital, and then they lost. And so as punishment, two kids from each district are sent to the capital to kill each other in a gladiator games in a big arena every year. And this is the 10th Hunger Games in this book, and Koryo is going to be a mentor to the girl from District 12, which is the same district that the protagonist from the Hunger Games came from, Katniss Everdeen. And my sister told me this book was a really good example of a character who goes from being a good guy to being a villain. That this book handled that progression of character very well. And so I thought, okay, that's interesting. I'll go ahead and read it, even though I haven't read The Hunger Games in probably almost 10 years, and I haven't read any of the other books at all. And so I read the book, and I didn't like it as much as my sister did. And I think part of what I didn't like, I can go ahead and give a pass to, because Suzanne Collins, I can tell that she did not want to just do a repeat of what she did in the first Hunger Games book. For example, the Hunger Games trilogy is from the perspective of somebody who lives in the districts, and this book is from the perspective of somebody who lives in a capital. And we get a little bit of, okay, it's not quite as cut and dry as our characters from the districts made it seem like in the Hunger Games books. For example, some of the people in the districts, they would have you believe, oh, everyone in the capital is evil. They're all just awful. Let's kill them all and rise up against them. But Koryo, he was just a little kid when the war happened, and it's not his fault that the Hunger Games are happening. Yes, he is part of the system, but he doesn't really have a choice. His family is dirt poor. If they lose their apartment, then they won't have anywhere else to go. He feels like he needs the financial award for whoever's contestant in the games wins. The mentor will get a little bit of money and possibly a scholarship to university, and he really needs that so that he can continue to support his family. And so this makes the wise choice that you look at Breaking Bad. Walter White, spoilers for that show that everyone has watched except for me, but Walter White at the beginning of that show, he feels like he is going into the meth making business to support his family, because we the audience, we love an underdog. And Koryo, Walter White, they start off as underdogs. Life is completely stacked against them, and they are really working their butts off to try and get a win. So I feel like that is handled very well, and I feel like a lot of what Koryo does, anytime he does something that's morally a little bit questionable, you can understand why he does it. I don't think there's really any moment in this book where I would say, he's just being a cartoonish supervillain. They've kind of jumped the shark here. I think even on up until the very end of the book, where, again, spoilers, he is fully transitioned into the somewhat more power-hungry version of the character that he is in the Hunger Games books decades later, I still understand why he's doing what he's doing. And so I like that. Now, I will say, the big thing that drew me to the first Hunger Games book was children murdering each other, and this book doesn't really have a whole lot of that. It's almost halfway into the book before the Hunger Games actually begin. We spend a lot of time setting up that Koryo comes from a poor family, that the guy who is in charge of the games. He doesn't like Koryo for some reason. And then there's this other woman who's involved with the games, and she's a psychopath. And there's a whole lot of setup before we actually get to the games. And I do feel like we could have trimmed like a third of this book. We could have gotten to the Hunger Games a little sooner and then had the rest of the book. Also, the Hunger Games themselves don't take very long. And I was surprised once we actually got to the Hunger Games that I didn't enjoy them as much as I thought I would. In the first Hunger Games book, you are right there with Katniss. She is fighting for her life, and you are there with her, and you are on the edge of your seat, and you cannot put the book down. In this one, you are there with Koryo watching the games on a TV screen. And so there are chapters and chapters where Koryo and his classmates, who are also mentors in the game, are basically just sitting there waiting for something to happen on the screen. And I understand that Suzanne Collins wants this to be a little bit different than the first Hunger Games book, so we're going to be, the POV character is going to be from the capital instead of from the districts, but then when you're showing the Hunger Games, that provides us with a few chapters that are pretty boring. And basically these guys are just waiting for something to happen. And when we are waiting for something to happen, that's not good. And then after the Hunger Games are over, the book takes a hard right turn that I was not expecting, where, spoilers, basically, the people in charge of the games find out that Koryo and his tribute, Lucy Gray, that they cheated in order to win. And then he is forced to become a peacemaker in District 12, basically a police officer. And then, basically, then we are kind of developing his romance with Lucy Gray Baird. And I have to say, I did not care about the romance angle. That was something I was not interested in. The only reason I read this book was because I wanted to see his transformation into a villain. And we do get that, but it almost always feels like a B plot in service of the A plot of him being head over heels in love with this girl that he helped win the games. And I just didn't care about that. And part of it might be that I already know where this character ends up in the main Hunger Games books and how fiercely devoted to the Hunger Games he is and how he wants to put the districts in their place. And so I know he is not going to marry a girl from the districts. Now, I have said before that it doesn't matter, the destination of a character doesn't matter as much as how they get there. And so, in theory, even though I know that he is not going to end up with Lucy Gray, that I should still be interested. But I just wasn't interested in a romance subplot. In the first Hunger Games book, there was kind of a romance subplot, but it was all manufactured for the purpose of the games. Peeta, who is the guy from District 12, he goes on TV and says that he's madly in love with Katniss, and he does that to try and get sympathy so that people will send him presents when he's in the arena. And then by the end of the book, they have to pretend like they're in love with each other so that the Capitol doesn't kill them in their sleep for being made the fool out. So in that book, yes, there is a romance angle, but it feels much less than what this book is giving us. This book is actually doing the romance thing that I just don't care about. And so, overall, I didn't hate this book. I did enjoy a lot of it, but I realize that she is trying to write a very different book. She doesn't want to get repetitive, and mad props for that, but in trying to do something different, I feel like she has kind of written herself into a corner, like, well, if I'm going to use a character from the Capitol as my protagonist, I can't really show the Hunger Games, and so it's just going to be characters watching the games on a TV screen, which is really boring. And then we have like half the book of Koryo kind of trying to get with Lucy Gray, and then some other stuff happens. And once the stuff actually starts happening, which is kind of close to the end of the book, then it's like, oh, finally, stuff is actually happening. And then I was a lot more invested. But for my money, it took a little too long to get there. But I don't begrudge Suzanne Collins trying to tell this story, but also trying to do it without feeling like she's a one-trick pony, and trying some different things, even if that may have made the book a little bit weaker, in my opinion. So that is all that I have to say about the Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes. I can never remember the title. That's all I have to say about that book. I hope you guys like this video, and I will see you guys in the future. Have a good one.